This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. Event Horizon ruined my childhood. I was around 13 years old when I came across this film, and it scared me so much that I never picked it up again until just last year. Why did I watch it so young? Because I didn't know it was rated R, and the film was marketed as a mystery sci-fi film, when in fact it is pure nightmare fuel. Of course, the rewatch proved that it was nowhere near as scary or well made as I remember. The sound effects are corny, the side characters are horrendous, and there are some noticeable editing and writing issues that mess with the flow of the film. But you have to remember that A, this is a 90s film with a different set of tropes and limited resources that may seem problematic today but were fairly standard back then, and B, the film went through worse production hell than what the Event Horizon went through in the film. Paul W.S. Anderson and the team had to take out important moments for budgetary reasons. They had to force release the film a whole month earlier because of Titanic's scheduled release date, meaning they only had 4 weeks of editing time instead of the promised 10. And to add salt to the injury, they had to cut out most of the violence in the film because the test audiences were fainting in the theater, which nowadays is usually a marketing tactic, but this was a genuine problem that caused the team to massively shorten its runtime from 130 minutes to just 96 minutes. Naturally, the critics bashed the fuck out of the film upon release, and the unintentionally half-baked film became a complete failure. Except, people started talking about it. Despite everything, Event Horizon still had some of its original flavors intact, and people noticed it. It was a scary film.
Thank you.
So what exactly made or makes Event Horizon such a terrifying film? Well, there are more than one answer to this. And while I too found myself smiling with glee at all the things that basically traumatized me, there was one specific detail that stood out this time around that I never noticed initially. The lighting. To better understand how lighting plays a role in different sections of the film, let's first go over some of Event Horizon's other frequently mentioned strengths. Although my younger self went into this film expecting a fun sci-fi thriller, I vividly remember being constantly on edge, especially from the moment the crew entered the ship. Indeed, even with the choppy editing that was by no means the fault of the creators, Event Horizon always feels ominous. One big reason for this dreadful atmosphere is the visual design. From the spiky doors that insinuate the mouth of an unknown beast to narrow paths that further swallow the characters, every detail of the ship reminds the audience of its autonomy and vitality. Like the deep sea or outer space, the Event Horizon evokes fear because it is independent and uncontrollable. The best visual representation of this concept is the core. The central corridor seems endless and artificial. The entrance is unnaturally symmetrical and clutter-free. The first containment does an abrupt 180 with sharp metallic textures and rotating walls that, well...
looks like a meat grinder to me.
Then there is the core itself. It is large, imposing, and centered with a unified patterned surroundings that constantly redirect your attention to the core. The entirety of this second containment echoes the qualities of a colossal planet or a giant underwater creature lurking in the sea of darkness. It is both beautiful and frightening, its size overwhelming and its environment seemingly boundless. However, as threatening as it is, the core is not what maintains the tension, for it is, at the end of the day, contained and therefore avoidable. In fact, none of the tangible and perceptible things carry out this task because Event Horizon doesn't have a physical antagonist. Right, Dr. Weir from Hell is very much physical. Too physical, but for the majority of the film, the main threat remains psychological in nature. It's either a projection, a hallucination, or nothing at all.
Treatise!
Fear and tension are constant because it's the entire setting that is after the crew, not one specific entity. And supporting this invisible force is another clever narrative premise.
We're leaving.
Event Horizon builds its story around characters who are trying to escape, not explore. This premise is beautifully established by the leading characters who are normal.
You don't believe in that kind of stuff, do you?
that's where we're at, people. Every decision, except this one, and every reaction, maybe except this one, comes from a place of logic, which is sadly a rarity in films like this, especially in the 90s. But look what normal can do. It makes the characters believable, the ship more threatening, and every conflict between them more engaging. It adds an immediate and palpable sense of urgency to every corner of the film, and honestly, it's just satisfying to follow coherent, intelligent characters. Thank you, Miller.
F this ship.
But if there's one thing Event Horizon was most famously known for, it's the unexpected gore. Wow, that's a word I haven't said in years. But there's no better term to describe what this film offers. And I say unexpected, partly because many people walked into this film with the wrong idea, but more so because the film itself misdirects the audience into believing that there will be little to no violence. Like I said, the film relies on psychological and atmospheric horror for the majority of its runtime. And while there are a few bloody images along the way, they're never gratuitous or unwarranted. So when the garbled video of the previous crew is finally cleaned up an hour into the film, the last thing you expect to see is a bloodbath. I recently talked about the power of unexpected violence in my Green Room video, so I'll save the lecture. But the hell sequences in Event Horizon are disturbing even when you do expect it. Firstly, it is always presented in fast cuts. Because most shots are less than 10 frames long, all you ever get is a feel of what is happening. The color, the mood, and the sound. In other words, you get the atmosphere of violence before the image. The difference is that this time you do get the image. You know something awful is happening, you just can't see the details. This means that the hell footage is capable of playing with your imagination while also providing a glimpse of explicit images to fill in the blanks. Images that are as overt and excessive as possible. And this brings us to the second point. The gore effects are mostly practical. Specifically for the hell footage, Anderson and the crew avoided CGI by using static shots of carefully decorated body casts, allowing the effects to look as realistic and grisly as possible. Then they inserted a few repeating shots of real-life actors and added minor transition effects and image overlays to give life to the scene, no pun intended. The resulting footage is a terrifying vision of hell that stands the test of time. Plain, vivid, and not warm. This is where lighting and color come into play. If you haven't noticed by now, Event Horizon is an extremely cold film with almost every shot dominated by white and blue, bright and naked.
I'm so cold.
Now we're going to be talking Kelvin scale, so in case you don't know how that works, a tungsten light is usually between 27 to 3200 K, a standard fluorescent globe around 4500 K, and general daylight between 55 to 6500 K. In a nutshell, the lower the K value, the yellower the image gets, and the higher the K value, the bluer and whiter it gets. Of course, color temperature values alone cannot accurately describe the scene color since they always interact with the white balance setting. So if a scene appears blue, it doesn't necessarily mean that the lighting has an objectively high value temperature, but that it is simply higher than the set white balance point. And there's a whole other layer to consider with color grading, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll refer to the objective K values to describe the general look, and disregard the other factors for this section.
Right. Well,
I did just say that Event Horizon is a very cold film, but this too kinda depends on which chapter you're on. Event Horizon can be divided into three big chunks: the journey, the discovery, and the escape. During the journey section, which takes place on a Lewis and Clark vessel, the shots mostly use high-key lighting that are kept at a neutral white, around 4500 K in temperature. It is true that a lot of films from this time have a similarly neutral look, but Event Horizon mixes in high-temperature practical lights to spice up the neutral shots and foreshadow the impending doom. The closer the crew gets to the event horizon, the colder the temperature gets and more dominant the color accents become. However, this buildup comes to an abrupt stop once the crew boards the event horizon. With the tension at all-time high, the cold lighting is suddenly replaced with warm key and fill lights, with only the visible practical lights remaining on the cooler side of the spectrum. Although overall the cooler tones still take the cake, there's definitely a notable clash between the two opposing temperatures that mirror the silent battle between the crew and the vessel. And to properly highlight the clash, this act minimizes the use of neutral whites and maximizes the use of blues, reds, and greens. Speaking of, one fun way to watch this film is to associate the blues with Dr. Weir and the greens with Captain Miller's crew and see how the two colors fight for position in each chapter. Give it a try. The dark and stylized look is also an effective but somewhat predictable lighting approach for a horror film. So while it might comparably have the most unique look, the second chapter also has the most conventional progression.
What are you telling me, that this ship is alive?
The last act of the film is an extension of the second that gradually unveils itself through different narrative revelations. With each mystery solved, the blues and the whites regain power and take control over the frame, until it is filled with high-temperature lightings that make everything on screen transparent, as in, there is nothing hidden and nothing dramatized. It's almost devoid of emotions, as cold and strict as an operation table. And that's the key to why Event Horizon's lighting is scary in and of itself. It makes everything feel surgical. As mentioned earlier, the majority of the second act is quite dark and stylized, with different colors and light sources being used to communicate a particular mood, a sense of mystery and nervousness. This is what you expect to see from a horror film. But then the film subverts your expectation with the bright surgical whites, which are deliberately used during the most horrifying parts of the film: the decompression, the recovered tape, and the hell vision. The idea of surgery lacks emotion in execution and control for the patient. It's the combination of the unknown and the unmotivated. There is no reasoning, no bargaining your way out, and no darkness to cover yourself. Everything is on display, spotlighted and objectified, like the victims in these scenes. Except none of them are undergoing surgery, they're being killed. By juxtaposing the most gruesome and emotional scenes of the film with the most detached and vulnerable color, the film is essentially magnifying the monstrosity of the situation for the audience. And by simultaneously associating light with horror, the film takes away the only safeguard you have. It's like how films like Midsommar generate unease by having everything take place in the daytime. In fact, revisit the film and pay attention to how the rest of the visions are lighted. You'll see a clear pattern for each character and be able to determine the intended emotional tone for the different hallucinations. But after all this time, there is one particular scene that is rather unfitting to the discussed lighting pattern.
We are crossing the Umbilicus, making our approach to the event horizon.
The Umbilicus. This scene of a long tunnel filled with welcoming orange lights appears out of nowhere, just seconds after encountering one of the most aggressively white and blue thunderstorms surrounding the event horizon. At first glance, the rough tonal transition feels reassuring. The crew has managed to discover the ship, survived the storm, and made a safe landing. The worst part of the mission is now over, but the presented visual comfort is too undeserved, and the tonal gap too wide to be ignored. You quickly realize that this pathway is but a form of an aggressive mimicry, a predator luring its prey with an inviting model. After all, the ship is alive. This scene is the first big turning point, the first warning to the crew that there is only catastrophe ahead. It is the last calm before the storm, and the last step before the point of no return. And they've crossed it. Hello everyone, thank you as always for watching. It's true that the rewatch was nothing close to my first experience, but Event Horizon genuinely did scare me when I was a kid. So while I suggest you take things with a grain of salt, I meant everything I said about the film's strength, and I hope you enjoyed. But if you've never heard of this film and are wondering where I find all these interesting works, I urge you to check out Mubi, the sponsor for this video. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe, ranging from works of iconic directors to emerging auteurs. And since every film is hand-picked, you'll be able to not only find films you already love, but also discover new films you haven't seen before. For instance, I'm currently in Korea for a few months, and I got to watch Fatih Akin's 2019 horror crime film, Golden Glove, on Mubi's library. This film was recommended to me by quite a few people, and while it's a very difficult film to watch, it has a surprising number of beautifully crafted shots with gorgeous lighting. So if you love crime films and you love great cinematography, I recommend you check it out. And of course, even if you're elsewhere, Mubi always has wonderful selection of works available at all times. Plus, right now, you can try Mubi free for 30 days by using my link at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. That's MUBI.com/SpikimaMovies. spotify.com/SpikimaMovies. So go try it out, and I'll see you in the next one.